All right, everyone. Let's focus on some deep dives. It's time to get into some individual plants. That includes native and food plot species. So I'm going to start with food plot species right now, and then I will eventually mix in some natives. Today's focus is buckwheat. So right in front of you is a fairly healthy buckwheat plant. Probably could get, I would say they on general for a good crop it can grow waist high. But let's go ahead and get into the cons of buckwheat. Not every plant has this rosy picture where everything's perfect, but there are some drawbacks that buckwheat can present if you're not careful. So for those of you that want to put it in a mix, like I've got here in my summer blend, so you can see soybean spattered with buckwheat, right here's a sun hemp. You need to be careful about the rate at which you sow this. Buckwheat grows so fast that it will choke out competing competition. As a matter of fact, on average, this buckwheat is at least 2 to 2.5 times the size of my soybean plants. So you can imagine what's going to happen here if you plant too much of this together. It's just literally going to choke it out. And this is a small cluster that's kind of come up together, which is fine. I'd rather have spacing like that for this particular mix. The other con is if you allow volunteer seeding, again, this is where speed and density play a factor. If you allow volunteer seeding of this, you have to be very cautious that it doesn't create too much. And you will be fighting this off for quite a while until frost hits, if you don't want that to happen. So this is more of a strategic planting type plant. I do recommend it in a summer mix, and I'll get to that in a minute. But that's just a handful of cons that this plant has. It's just the rate it grows can be an overburden on some plants if you're trying to keep, soybean going or whatever. Now let's get into the pros. There's actually a large list of pros. Let me get rid of that weed here. I can't stand looking at that. One of the pros right off the bat, buckwheat is known as a phosphorus producing plant. This plant breaks down phosphorus in the ground that cannot be converted for the other plants. And that is correct. There are minerals locked up in your soil that cannot be accessed, and it's just sitting there. So if your plants are just growing, not very well, there may actually be a lot of minerals locked up in here. And this plant leaches a acid in the ground. This is one of the rarities in the plant world. It leaches an acid in the ground, and it releases all those minerals under there, mainly phosphorus. That's the number one thing that you're improving. Calcium is number two. And then the other plants around them can feed off of them. So I'm actually helping my soybean. And that way I don't have to use extensive fertilizer rates, because this plant is actually, it's almost like a symbiotic relationship. And this helps, soybean helps buckwheat by producing nitrogen if you put the inoculant on your plants, and this feeds it phosphorus and calcium. Now, one of the other benefits is if you plant this in a pure stand, you want to make sure that you destroy these before they flower out, because you can speed up the soil restoration process by putting a lot of biomass back into your soil very quickly. You can get 2 cycles of growth out of these in one summer setting. Maybe if you had a good year you could get 2.5, and then you can set out your fall blends. By then though, you would have a lot of biomass like down there rotting on your ground, and that can quickly help rejuvenate your soil, hold moisture like I've explained before. Now, another benefit that we have here is buckwheat attracts predatory insects. And if you've been staring at this video long enough, you've probably seen them flying in and out of here. There's one over here on the flower now. This actually creates nature's natural insecticide. By drawing these predatory insects in, I am saving soybean, sun hemp, and any other plant from overrun pests. And last year I had overrun pests. So now I've put in nature's version of pesticide. Big time help. I can already see that this is paying off because I do not see nasty insects up here. And usually by this time I've got June bugs or aphids. Sometimes they can get overwhelming. Cucumber beetles, I've seen them a time or two up here. There is a kudzu beetle that will get all over soybean and stunt the growth and cause major problems. But by having these guys here to defend my food plot, that is exactly why this food plot is doing so well right now, minus the weeds, and I will be taking care of that shortly. So that is a fantastic benefit to have. Now, the root system I've mentioned before leaches that acid, and based on the scale of the plant compared to the root system it actually grows is kind of small. So your root system might get out to about where my hand is at from this furthest plant out here. Might go a little further, maybe. So you have a radius in which these are affecting the soil. So if you allow volunteer seeding, which is what I'm going to do, the next wave that comes up will start improving another area, and then it keeps, going around and around over time. And that is how your soil can get better at a slower pace versus planting it in a pure stand. Other benefits that buckwheat has. This is a big time honeybee drawer. And a lot of people don't think about that, but honeybees are highly important because this is like candy to them. They love buckwheat. I've got 2 hives over there by the barn, and I've already seen them out here a few times already. So they've just recently found it out here, and it won't be long till they'll be swarming these plants. But since it draws honeybees in, whether it's a wild hive or a natural hive, this will also help your soybean. With honeybees in here, this will draw in bees to pollinate your pods once the soybean flowers out. So it's a twofold system. You're actually trying to say, hey, honeybees, I need you here to help. So this is like a calling card for honeybees. Other things that can go well for you here is the fact that it grows so quickly. It can shade and hide other soybean plants if you're trying to make sure soybean can survive deer pressure. So when you have it in close enough stands together, it can hide these and not completely choke them out in order to save your soybean or buy it at least a few more days of growth, which makes a major league difference on how your soybean turns out in the end. I'm trying to think of one more here. I know there's something I'm missing. Oh, yes. This is also very important that you may not think about this. Water content. Out of all the plants in your food plot, buckwheat has the highest water ratio of the plants. Approximately 70%, if not higher, is water. So if I break a limb off here, or a stem, let's use this one. Oh, I already felt the water come out of it. There is a very high amount of water content. If I can get this camera to focus, there we go. There is a very high water content in this plant. I squeeze it, and see all that water on my finger? It doesn't take much effort. Come on, focus back up. There it goes. Tons of water is stored in this plant. So if you crush this, you're actually watering your next seed. Another thing this helps with, because of the high water content, this gives deer their daily requirements for water. They don't have to go to the creeks or streams or rivers or puddles to drink water. It is actually in this plant for them. So if you have enough of it, not only are the deer eating good nutrition from these plants, but they're also getting water that they need every day of their lives. So that is a good benefit on this. I will also post other stats and links to these plants. I'm going to put as much information in that post as possible, because there is some things I may have missed, and I don't want to miss all the information, and try to help you all out as much as possible with these. But I believe this is an awesome addition to the food plot, and this will not only help my soybean, but the other plants around it. So there you go, guys. Just starting these deep dives, and it'll be off to the next species later on. Have a good one.